Welcome to InBold, the podcast from Strategy and Middle East. I'm Nai.
And I'm Kareem, and we're so excited to bring you this next season on Arts and Culture. Our region has been going through an amazing cultural transformation, and we at Strategy and Middle East have been privileged to be part of it, and we really want to share it with you.
We've got inspiring discussions with great guests who are at the heart of the region's cultural landscape. Yalla, let's get started.
Let's go!
Shalom Bushaitas, you are the Executive Director of Arts and Culture Strategy at the Qiddiya Investment Company. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm looking forward to a great conversation, but before we delve into it, could you very quickly, for those listeners or viewers who haven't heard of Qiddiya, tell us a bit about the project?
Qiddiya Investment Company is one of the PIF entities and developing the Qiddiya city, the city of play, as we call. It's a city that playfulness, innovation, experimentation will come to life to one destination.
Excellent. Obviously a place that will be a lot of fun, but...
It's only fun, actually, but also new things and things that actually we haven't seen, not only in Saudi Arabia, but actually globally. You see the last announcement that we did with Dragon Ball. It's something that no one could expect, and we make it happen.
Which is a great point to take us into our first topic of conversation. Qiddiya is just one of the projects happening in Saudi, but you've worked in Spain, in Greece, in Italy, in Egypt. How do you compare the scale of what's happening in arts and culture in Saudi to these other places?
There is no comparison. There is no comparison. And we were together in the Global Cultural District Network 2 weeks ago, and we saw the projects globally. And when we compare Saudi Arabia with the rest of the world, there's no comparison. I mean, here the projects, the way that we're doing the project is different, but also the magnitude, the size, the complexity is another level. And that's why it's so interesting. It's so interesting because for us, I mean, for people like me that have worked in culture 32 years, it's very interesting to challenge ourselves in new ways of thinking, and also in the elements of culture that in other places we could not find. And this is very, for me at least, is very interesting.
So give me some examples of these.
For example, I had a very nice question when I was talking in the Global Cultural District Network that how we make culture without people, which is reality. I mean, most of the projects that we are doing are parts of the city that doesn't exist, is under construction or under design and construction. So how we evolve actually in all these future plans, cultural plans, the people, or how we integrate people to and take their opinions. And I think this is also the answer, is for us, at least the way that we work in Qiddiya, is that for me, people always, in all my work, wherever I have worked, I think culture is from people to people. So that's why we use a lot consumer research, we use a lot preferences, behaviors research that is not very often in this kind of scale of projects, and for sure is not very often in the beginning. Normally we do something, especially in the rest of the world, we are doing this kind of studies after the outcome. So we have, let's say, a show, we have a new entity, and then we ask the people what they like, how they like, but we don't include them in the beginning. So the way that we are doing differently, at least in Qiddiya Investment Company, is to include the people from the real beginning. And I think this is very important. It's very important also because Saudis are very creative, are very open to participate, and they are very open to contribute. And this is also amazing when you want to create new things.
Excellent, excellent. Clearly, culture and heritage has existed in Saudi for thousands of years. Yet the focus of the government on it as an enabler is something that is more recent. So when you're operating on such a large project, but at the same time in an environment where the sector is also, its enablers are being built. You know, the things you normally expect to find in other places, like funding mechanisms, like third sector entities, are all being built at the same time. How are you dealing with this, and how does your experience help you deal with this kind of setup?
I think this is the beauty of, for us, that we are working here, of what we are doing, in a sense that we, in some cases, we start from scratch, that we have, I call it creative chaos, meaning that we need to do many things in parallel for us to be able to create an outcome on our work. But also this is a beauty that we don't have constraints, we don't have barriers. We are free to imagine, to think differently, and at least the way that. So I was in Egypt in the Grand Egyptian Museum as a head of operations, and I was following the new vision in Saudi Arabia. I tried to be updated of what is happening in the culture sector globally. So I knew about the vision, but being in Saudi Arabia for the last 6 years, I think the experience is different, because the whole cultural identity, the cultural definition of Saudis drives the vision, and this is really important and really interesting.
Another very unique intersection that you work at is you're head of arts and culture, but Qiddiya City is actually an entertainment destination. So how does this focus on play, mixed with innovation, mixed with creativity, change your approach to how you look at arts and culture and its role within the city?
Very interesting. I think this is challenge, but it's very interesting also how we see arts. I mean, if you go a little bit, if you forget a little bit about Qiddiya City, playfulness and entertainment, and we talk about culture, what are the forms of culture, or how we express culture in a governmental level or in a public level. Sometimes we would like to have the Royal Opera, for example, which is an expression of formality. Yes, it's art, it's a part of the culture, but also it has a statement. It comes with a narrative that it's quite more formal. An UNESCO site, for example, any UNESCO site. I'm from Greece, and if we talk about Acropolis, or Acropolis Museum, you talk about something that it defines or is connected with the cultural identity of the place and with the people, and also with the country. So it's completely, this is one side, let's say. On the other side, we can see arts and culture that can be, if we see how we start arts and culture, is from people creative people that they would like to try something or to experiment, or it's innovation, or technology. So playfulness, I think, if we see from the eyes of the kid, is actually the exploration of enjoyment. So I think this is what we are doing, and I think I see culture and arts, and the definition in our portfolio is regarding how the formality of the arts can create and define a destination. And I think this is really, really interesting, at least for me, of how we forget everything that is has connotation of formal expression, and we go to actually the core of creativity and explore this area of arts and culture. I think this is, for me, the most important. And this is the way that we are working in Qiddiya City.
I know you haven't made any announcements yet, but are there any examples you can give me about how you've woven the formal elements of art and culture, but yet into an entertaining visitor experience, or how you're planning to?
In Qiddiya City, we merge 5 different sectors that comes together and create one destination. We have entertainment that includes all our attractions. We have the motorsport sector. We have sports, e-gaming, and culture. So can you imagine that you as a visitor come in the morning in Qiddiya, and until the night that you have a show in any of our theaters or any of our, let's say, cultural assets, you have so many things to do, different things, that there is no actually destination in the world that you can find all this combination. So I think this is the key, element that is the visitor's experience that comes together and explores.
So if I want to test this, the reality of this way of thinking, will I, as a visitor, know that I'm in a cultural experience? Will I be in a museum? Are you still using the same formal definitions?
No.
Or will I be learning about arts and culture without realizing it because I'm having fun and enjoying it while experiencing?
I think you will have both. I mean, in any destination, culture or not cultural destination, it includes cultural elements. I mean, even in the destinations that we have around the world that we consider that they are not cultural-driven destinations, I think culture and arts creativity exist everywhere. So I think from this perspective, you will realize that something exists there. Plus that you talk to somebody that believes that creativity is influence every kind of sector and exist in every sector, so you will find it anyway.
Okay, so we look forward to an interesting way of experiencing, a new way of experiencing arts and culture. Okay. I'd like to jump to another topic, and sometimes it's also not a criticism, but something that's very easy to dismiss. Whenever we're in greenfield projects, like Qiddiya City, like many other projects that are happening, people get caught up with the way things look and the actual physical buildings. Yet from all your years of experience, you also understand that it's not the building that makes the experience or that elevates the arts and the cultural activity. Yeah. It's actually the ecosystem and the grassroots aspect of it and the enablement of it that allows it to become alive and a thriving cultural scene. How do you balance these two things when you're working, as you said, you're working on something that doesn't yet exist?
I will say that starting from Saudi Arabia, in Saudi Arabia, the cultural identity of Saudi Arabia is intangible. So they are not driven by objects, they are driven by the storytelling and songs and daily activities around the country that they have different practices. And this is an interesting thing because it drives us, all of us that we are foreigners and we are doing culture in this country, actually give us the direction. And the direction is not always the tangible direction, sometimes it's the intangible direction. This is one thing. The second thing is that I said before that Saudis, especially Saudi youth, is very creative, and we have many talents that we don't know because, as you said, the ecosystem is not ready, or we don't know exactly in a systematic way where are they. However, they exist. We can see this in every activity, in every event that is happening. So this is the second element that gives us where we have to go. The third is that if we cross-check every benchmark or every example, global example, and we're layering in the different approach, we have a part of the physical assets that, exist, the theater, museums. If we go in a layer lower, we will see that the intangible assets actually exist even stronger. I mean, if you see cities like Edinburgh, for example, what is the most important when we are thinking Edinburgh is the theater festival. When we are thinking Basel, is the Art Basel. So what I'm trying to say is that the intangible element that comes with festivals, it comes with expressions of arts and culture that they are not permanent and in a given space and place. I give the identity and the qualities of this human-centric approach of what is culture. And I think this is matched together with the other 2 points that I said before, that this is linked back to the Saudi intangible identity, heritage identity, and also with the youth, that they are ready to participate. They don't need to go to the museum to participate. They can I mean, you can see this, you feel it, you experience. If you are in Riyadh, Jeddah, in any corner of this country, you understand that the people are ready to express themselves in the creative ways.
So I want to pick up on a couple of things that you said, because I find those very interesting and unique, again, to the context that we're in. When you mentioned the young population, and they're not only young and creative, they're also very digitally savvy. You know, if we look at many metrics in terms of engagement on digital, how has that affected your thinking in terms of designing the experiences or designing the physical assets?
Affected, not affect. Affect in from the point of view that we have to take into account. We have to take into account that we talk to people that they are young and digital savvy, but on the other side, some of the things that we are doing needs years to happen, and we don't know the technology of the future. However, as we saw during COVID, technology jumped until 5 or 6 or 7 years during 1 year of COVID. So I think the approach is to be flexible. I think whatever we are doing should be flexible enough to adapt the future innovations, but also always we have to ask the people. I mean, we have to try it with the people.
Another point that you also said, which was interesting, is you said, you know, Saudis don't need to go to a museum to experience culture because they've experienced it in a different way so far, and because they're younger and more digitally savvy and so on. So once this Qiddiya City arts and culture infrastructure is finished, will there be assets that I don't recognize in terms of typology? Will there be cultural experiences that look like actually that you might confuse for entertainment, but actually they're cultural because we're trying to give them an experience in a different way?
In every of the projects that are happening in this country, not only Qiddiya City, in every project, in Neom, in Alula, in King Salman Park, in Diriyah, all the projects, they look the future somehow. Even if they use prototypes of the past, they look, and this is how we should do it. We will not be different on this, but I think what I answered before is the flexibility is the most important. So it's not if you have it in a closed or open environment, if you have a building or you don't have a building, and you call it museum or you call it something else. Is this what it matters? What it matters is what kind of experiences you will provide actually to your audiences, your visitors and your consumers. And the most important that all of us were looking, I mean nationally, is that to the country to provide experiences that no one else in the world is doing. And I believe that Qiddiya City will lead this.
So I like what you're saying, because I think if I want to summarize, we're saying we're building. So we're still building for the future. We're building experiences. We're using innovation. We're keeping ourselves flexible, but we're basing all these experiences in our identity and our heritage and in our intangible culture. So it's not going to be completely alien, but it's not going to be completely traditional either.
You cannot do culture without connected with the past, and not to the past, connected with the cultural identity. I think for me this is a principle. I don't believe that when you throw cultural institutions in cultural identities that they are completely different can survive. That they are not, because culture, as I said, is from culture, from people to people. So they need to be relevant. And to be relevant, people need to find something that is connected with them. And the cultural identity is the key element to connect with what we offer. All of us, not here, globally I speak, but can you imagine that you have, I don't know, you have an institution that, you know, is coming from United States to Greece? Maybe it will not work. I believe that will not work, actually.
Okay. We've been talking a lot about, if you like, the aspirational or the experiential side of culture. We need to talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of also how we make ecosystems grow and thrive. One of the most important aspects is talent development.
Yeah.
In particular, in the context we're in Saudi Arabia, it's a nascent sector in terms of the availability of workforce and talent, and that's also, again, something that's being built as we go along. But Qiddiya city is going to open before all of these programs are entirely complete, I assume. And so how are you approaching the concept of bringing in the expertise that you need, but at the same time making sure that you're developing this next generation of Saudi talent that will own and continue with the arts and culture sector?
I will not reply as Qiddiya city. I will reply as a person that works here in this country for 6 years, and I see in front of my eyes how the whole ecosystem is growing. So if you remember how the ecosystem it was in 2018 and what is happening now, there is no comparison in terms of available talents. Why? Because we have many activations and events during this year, even after COVID, that actually expose the talents to new opportunities and new young people that they wanted to actually explore new careers to start involving with the creative industries. And this is something that is growing. I think when Qiddiya City, NEOM, and all these giga projects will start operating, we will have enough, because the whole system, yes, maybe we have some of, some of the talents or specific niche areas are missing, but still. One of the examples is the biggest music festival that we have in the country, that as far as I know, is the first year all the supporting staff, operating staff were foreigners, and now more than 40% are Saudis. The last time that happened are Saudis. So this shows that the country is ready to reflect on what is happening, and the young population is actually that drives the whole, the whole change, but also this grow in the ecosystem, in the creative ecosystem.
It is definitely a great opportunity to not only grow employment but grow skills, and as you said, because of the nature of it, the younger population is actively seeking it, I think, compared to maybe the reputation of the sector in more mature markets. So.
Yes, but also in the mature market, I think the system and all the everything is more organized in a more standardized, actually, not organized, more standardized. That doesn't allow actually young people to jump the hierarchy, for example. Mm-hmm. Here we don't have hierarchy. I mean, you do the job, you don't do the job. It's so simple. I mean, but the interesting for me is that the young Saudis, they don't afraid to try. And this gives actually the potential of making the job in the end. And this is the creative economy. I mean, it's its core. I mean, it's to try, to explore, to go forward. And that's why I believe that everybody says about we have shortages of talents. Yes, today, but nobody will open today. We'll open maybe tomorrow or after tomorrow. And tomorrow and after tomorrow, as has happened and we experience all of us, we will have talents.
I like the optimistic outlook.
Yeah, it's not optimistic. I have worked in 8 different countries in my life. Some of them, they have young population, like Saudi Arabia. Some of them not. It's the first time in my life that I saw, that I see this participation of people to what is happening, and also this, and everything is related creativity and how we can contribute creatively to what is happening in the city, in our societies. And I think this is interesting, and that's why I don't believe that we will have so big shortage of talents that people say. It's not that we start from scratch. I mean, we started from scratch 6-7 years ago when I came. Now we are not completely. I mean, the country, in terms of cultural development or cultural evolution, has jumped decades in these 5 years, because a part of the push from the leadership to go forward on this direction It's also the people who are ready.
One of the really important enabling factors of arts and culture is funding. There's been a big debate around the world in terms of to what degree does arts and culture have to be self-sustaining, financially sustainable, or it has to be subsidized. How are you looking at the balancing of those two tensions?
I think the leadership of the country and the leadership of the Ministry of Culture has requests from all of us to think in terms of 21st century. And if you see globally, culture is not anymore, the side, let's say, contribution to the society that has to be subsidized fully from the government or fully from or supported only by sponsors. It has a commercial component that we need to activate. So in general, as a professional, I believe that we should, the cultural sector should be not more commercial driven only, but participate in the discussion that is happening globally of how we can be financially sustainable, because this will give security to the jobs that they are for creative people, will give security to the institutions. I mean, you remember what happened during COVID and during the crisis in 2010, that we have, I don't know how many museums in UK, for example, closed because they couldn't afford financially. You have theaters and performing arts centers closed whole Europe during the crisis. So instead of having this, the sector needs to think differently, and it has to include components that are related with business, related with investment, related with how actually help other industries to grow the indirect value of culture and arts. So sometimes a public art doesn't make any money, like the Cloud of Anish Kapoor in Chicago, but is the most visited place in the whole United States and contributes, I don't remember right now how many millions of dollars on communication to the city of Chicago. So from this perspective, yes, it doesn't make any money, but it contributes to the hospitality, real estate, communication. So for me, this is the terms and this is the direction that all of us we have to work.
Charalampos, we could go on for hours in this conversation. There's so much happening within the country, and that you're not only that you're responsible for, but also around you and with other projects and so on. And looking forward, no two cultural ecosystems are the same. They develop as a consequence of the conditions of the country in which they reside and the people that interact with them. But from what you've seen so far, how do you think the cultural ecosystem in Saudi will evolve?
It will evolve fast. I think faster than everyone expects. This is for me, with mistakes, with sometimes gaps, but will evolve. And this will give the basis of a better growth in the years after. If the question is related with qualities of the ecosystem, for me the most important in every cultural ecosystem is how the ecosystem is connected with the rest of the social life or the business life in the different layers of life. And I think somehow, as I said before, Saudis are ready for this. I mean, they have already integrated the whole creative economy in their daily life. I mean, we see art cafes, we see companies that make fashion that inspired and use crafts and different materials from the different regions. It's so interesting the way that things comes together, but I believe that they have all the ingredients, let's say, that will evolve quite fast.
It's interesting that you mentioned speed, because I recall on one of the projects we're working on, we're being asked to look at benchmarks of other countries, and it was, this country took 50 years to do this, and this country took 30 years, and this country took 100 years. And the pushback on us was, okay, just because it took 100 years somewhere else
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it has to take 100 years here. And I like very much what you said about mistakes. It's more of like an iterative, agile, somehow maybe some of it is borrowed, not consciously, but subconsciously borrowed from the way the tech sector, for example, works. We build things, we try things out, we learn from our mistakes, we continue, and we move faster towards success.
Yes, also we have to define when we say this happened and needs 50 years or 10 years or 20 years, what it is exactly, because sometimes what we are describing from our work, let's say, I do the same, is something that is more, how to say, is an ecosystem, is a small ecosystem of things that comes together and define something that we use as a benchmark. But sometimes if you break it down to smaller elements, some elements exist already in the country. And that's why I say the speed. I'm not waiting for any, I mean, the giga projects that we have in Riyadh, they have announced performing arts center already, different performing arts centers. I'm not waiting any performing arts center actually to see the performing arts scene to grow. We have last year the Theatre and Performing Arts Commission had 20 different teams got awards, theater awards last year, first time in the history of the country. When you have 20 teams around the country that actually practicing theater and performing arts, you don't want the building, you have it already. And this is for me the approach. I mean, all of us, I mean, in your work, in my work, when we come together and we make propositions, we have to actually understand and we explain things to other stakeholders, we have to understand also the size and the value of what we are describing. And sometimes the value exists in the breakdown of the benchmarks, not the overall benchmarks.
Lampus, this has been a really insightful perspective, I think, on how arts and culture is evolving in Saudi Arabia. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you too for inviting me.
I hope you found that conversation as insightful and interesting as I did. And if you did, please share it with your friends, colleagues, or anyone in your network that you think would also be interested in learning more about arts and culture in Saudi Arabia.